So Tech Tank, it's a lively and inclusive community, tech community where we wholeheartedly embrace tech enthusiasts from all walks of life. So I usually am the one kind of up here. We're going to mix it up in the future. However, we have 6 kind of core administrators, and so those are the people, and they kind of help us make everything happen. On top of that, we did have some special volunteers that came early to help us with the food, help us check in registration. So special thank you to all of them. Actually, I want to give everyone like a special round of applause that helped out. So this is the QR code round. This is the one that's probably most superfluous because you obviously came here through the meetup. But if you somehow got here and didn't know how you showed up here, then you should come and join our meetup. We also have a pretty active LinkedIn community. We put up a lot of posts. We put up other events that are not part of the meetup, so you can join that. Grab that QR code. And Slack. This is the one that's actually really cool. There's probably maybe half of you are on our Slack. We have a lot of events, discussions, support that you can find on our Slack group. So, any people here that's never been to a Tech Tank meetup ever before? Raise your hand. Cool. So just round of applause. Thank you for joining us. We always have a good blend of people, and so we like having new blood to sacrifice. If you're interested in speaking, we do source our talks from the community. So that QR code just takes you to a form where you can sign up and give us information, and we can reach out to you. We are going to book it usually a couple months in advance, but if you have an idea for like a conference talk that you may want to experiment, kind of do in a more local setting, or just have never spoken before but wanting to help building your talk, we're happy to support you in that. But also hosting. So these events, we host them, where we can get sponsorship from companies, and so they actually give this to the goodness of the heart. So the space you're in is a sponsor, it's Brain Station. We'll have them come in a second. If you think your company or someone you might know or their company could help us throw events like this, feel free to reach out to any one of the admin group members, me, or just fill in that information. We can kind of have a conversation with you. Also, next month. So we already know what our event is for next month. It's already scheduled. It's going to be on May 16th. It's going to be sponsored by 7 Ships, so it's in the roof garden space. That QR code just takes you to the meetup page where you can register. Also, if you're part of the meetup, obviously you can now see it, so we just put it up a day ago. And it's going to be an awesome panel on health tech. And we have a couple of great panelists who are going to help us and inform us about things happening in the health tech space. So, after we're done here, closing time is 8:30. We are actually going to start probably shooting you out a little bit before that. But 8:30 is like a hard stop. However, we don't have to end the night there. We can head over to a bar nearby. So we've kind of found one that's not too far that will take us. It's called the Parlor. We'll put this back up after the presentation so you can see over there. And final QR code. If you want to help us, despite giving us a little bit of money to help us keep going with these events, please consider donating, and that takes you to our donation page. So I now want to bring up our sponsor. So Michael's going to come up and tell us a little bit about Brain Station. That's the space we're in. That is the food we're eating. So we're not eating Brain Station.
The food's pizza you all love. No sponsorship partnership with them. They just are close by, make pretty good pizza. Thanks to all of you for coming out. Obviously not for Brain Station, for the Tech Tank event. It's amazing to see the space being used on a thing that you otherwise wouldn't. Nonzo, George, is an educator here and reached out and said, I'm part of this community. We love to host events. We would love to host an event here. And this is more than I thought we were signing up for. This is an amazing event that obviously has been put on here by Tech Tank and the team. And a great crowd. Like I said, 100 people would show up. And it's easy to say, harder to fill a room when people are obviously interested in the material. So I know that you're not here to listen to me. So I'm going to move through stuff really quickly. I guess just by show of hands, who's been here before / is familiar at all with Brain Station? Not bad. Pretty good. Welcome back. I don't know if you answered the first question or the second. So that's on me. For those that are not initiated or need a little bit of a reminder, we're a digital education company. So we offer courses and boot camps across the whole product lifecycle. Many of those are in the web development and software engineering space. Hence the 5th year. We've been in Toronto since 2012, formerly at Spadina and King, and now just kind of like kitty corner-ish at Spadina-ish in front. Big team, lots of partners that we've worked with over the years, but certainly the number of people that we've empowered through our courses, the shorter form certificate courses or boot camps is something we're all really proud of. We're obviously here in Toronto, which is great. We're also in New York, Miami, London, Vancouver. Online, I'd say the impact that we've been able to have, a lot of it happened during the 2020 to 2022 space where everyone was studying remotely. But our unofficial sixth campus is kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Some photos, people taking courses, people graduating, people generally being excited about their time here. Much like Tech Tank, we're working with companies in the community and around the globe. These are the folks that are teaching our courses. They're obviously some of the spots that our graduates are landing. They're helping us to decide, the things that we should focus on in the classroom, and helping to ensure that people who take courses after the camp are equipped with the skills that they need to be relevant in today's market and as things continue to change, because we all know they're ever changing. You need only pay attention to whatever this event was called, a JavaScript walk through time in cyberspace, and that's a mouthful. Some of our educators and instructors, just a sampling of them there. Some of where our grads have ended up, by face and name. For those who are thinking about taking a course, those who are thinking about taking the next step in their careers in software engineering, those are courses that we believe could be relevant to you. Take a look. Have any questions? There's a team here that's obviously readily available to answer your questions. If you have questions tonight, and I'll just be kind of floating around, eating what's left of the pizza. I showed this slide because it's something that I care about. I think the boot camp as a model, BrainStation in particular, if our job is to lower the barrier to access technical roles, one of those barriers is certainly financial for people. And so with that, we have a number of scholarships that are kind of co-sponsored by the companies that we work with and BrainStation to reduce the cost for those that fall into these categories. They're eligibility-based, again, in the spirit of lowering those barriers. And if you just like events, we also host events. And so if you have nothing going on tomorrow, we have an event. And if tomorrow is all full, then we have an event that's going on next week. QR codes, because we all love those. BrainStation.io is going to have all the information about our events, our courses, kind of everything and anything that we might be up to. And that's the end of this. I don't know if there's another slide for your squad. That's the end of it. Sweet. I'll hand you back over. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the hospitality. Welcome us back into the club.
All right, so now we're going to have the main event for the night. Thannia's going to come and give us an amazing presentation. Let me just get us situated.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. I'm Thannia. I've been a front-end developer since 2014. And is this next? Okay. I recently moved from Mexico last year, and I'm here now. You can see I don't have a slide about myself because today we are not here to talk about me. Today we are here to tell you the story of a baby, a little baby called JavaScript. The year was 1995. Some of you may have not been born yet. Some of you may have been babies like JavaScript, like me. Some of you may have been old. I'm not here to judge anyone's age. But just to put you in context, what was going on at the time, we had the Spice Girls, we had OJ, we had the Super Nintendo, and we had JavaScript being born. Back then, Netscape Navigator was the main browser for browsing the web. But browsers were static. You just serve HTML, that's what you got. And Netscape wanted to change this. They wanted to add dynamic functionality to their browser. Their idea was to add a scripting language to do that. So they partnered with Sun Microsystems, and this guy here called Brendan, I don't know if it's pronounced H-I, Brendan, or Boy Brendan. Why? Because Java was the most popular language at the time, and their idea was to bring Java to the browser. There's an alternate universe where Java is what we use for the web, not in ours. So eventually they figured out it was easier to just create a new language from scratch. Legend says that Brendan created JavaScript in just 10 days. I've been trying to confirm this. Some sources say it's true. Some say it might be true. Let's believe it's true just because it's more fantastical that way. So they create JavaScript. It looks kind of like Java. It has curly braces and whatnot, but on the behind, it's more like scheme, like functional programming. It was originally called Mocha. Brendan wanted to call it LiveScript. However, it was called JavaScript because, as I just said, Java was the most popular language at the time. They wanted to ride on that popularity, and now we are confused even to this day. Brendan says it was a marketing ploy to get it out. Thing is, it's called JavaScript. The browser wars then began. Netscape versus Internet Explorer. And our friends at Microsoft, they reverse engineered JavaScript, and they create their own version, which they called, I kid you not, JScript. So our baby JavaScript is still a baby. This is just like 1996, like 1 year. Already has an evil twin. So since JavaScript's and JScript's implementation was very different, this led to this infamous signs of best viewed with Netscape or best viewed with Internet Explorer, because you either program for one or for the other. You couldn't get like something that looked good on both, sorry. You may have seen this on the internet, maybe not. It's like a scar from the past. So Netscape then goes to the European Computer Manufacturers Association, whose goal is standardizing computing. And they take JavaScript and they look for a way to get all these scripting languages, JavaScript, JScript, and eventually ActionScript united together. However, this was no easy feat. Between 1997 and 1999, ECMAScript got 3 revisions. The first one, it was very similar to what we have now without some stuff. It didn't have a strict equality. They thought it was convenient at the time. Now we figure out it wasn't. It didn't have regex. It didn't have try-catch. By ECMAScript 3, they added these things. And then for ECMAScript 4, there wasn't a lot of consensus going on. They tried to create something very big. And some guy called Douglas Crawford, and Microsoft didn't like it. And Microsoft was playing dirty and started to add their own JavaScript to Internet Explorer. This led to something called fragmentation. If you ever worked with old Internet Explorer versions, it was like awful. Everybody hated it. I was too young to do that, but I heard about it. And ECMAScript 4 eventually got abandoned. It wasn't until 2015 when ECMAScript 6 came out that we finally get like this unified, nice JavaScript. But that's a lot of time, right? What we, us developers, do in the meantime, because the web goes on. Well, just like we as teenagers went to a lot of phases, we were punks, we were skaters, and JavaScript also has gone through a lot of phases, which in the way of frameworks, libraries, etc., to work around its limitations so we can still have the web that we love. Before, in the past, if you needed to do any change to a page, you needed to retrieve a whole page back. And then something called AJAX, which stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, came on, and it lets you do like retrieve data on the background without interfering with the display. We had Ruby on Rails, a web framework for the programming language Ruby. And it needed Ajax implementation. So some guy called Sam Stephenson comes and creates Prototype.js. I don't know if you ever heard of Prototype.js. Anyone? Yes, no? I worked on it on my first job. It was very confusing because it looks a lot like jQuery, but it isn't jQuery, so you cannot do some things. Its main thing was adding Ajax, created in 2005, but it also adds the $, and it extends the DOM. So there was a little bit of DOM manipulation you could do as well. It supports classes and class-based objects. I see it like maybe a jQuery dot, a jQuery older sibling. But around the time, maybe a year afterwards, we have this event called Barcamp NYC. And that guy over there is called John Resig. He was inspired by a library called CSS Query, and his goal was to make writing JavaScript code fun. And he comes up with this library called jQuery. Has anyone here heard of jQuery? Yes, we all have heard of jQuery because it's so popular that there are still websites using it to this date. They didn't see a point on migrating. What jQuery did best was traversing the DOM. It was very easy to go to a sibling, go to a parent, take a class with your nice $, or an ID, remove class, etc. It also used Ajax, so bonus points. You don't need prototype. You can have jQuery. Added animations, event handling, and one of its biggest things was also it made browser compatibility easier. You can now have something that looks vaguely similar in all browsers, so people can use the browser they prefer. And you could also create jQuery plugins. However, I forgot. Some of the things that jQuery introduced became eventually standard. So in JavaScript world, fetch did happen. Because jQuery was the first to use fetch. And now we have fetch as a standard. So fetch. However, programming only on jQuery created its own way of spaghetti hell. And developers now want to actually use architecture on the client side. So several frameworks come for that. One is called Knockout. It uses a model view model architecture. Declarative binding, automatic UI refresh is one of its things. It was popular because it was very easy to learn and not very opinionating. It did these dynamic bindings pretty well, and it didn't require a lot of tooling. Unfortunately, it was knocked out on the Ember versus Angular wars, which we will cover later in this presentation. Now, this guy over here, he's called Jeremy Ashkenazi. I may be mispronouncing his name, I'm sorry. He was a lane at the time because he created 3 things: Backbone, Underscore, and CoffeeScript. And what he wanted was a cleaner and more structured way of creating applications with less code. So we'll go over Backbone first. It introduced a model view controller architecture. It was designed for developing single-page applications. Its only dependency was underscore.js because it was another creation of its author. And it used an imperative programming style. That means that imperative programming, if you don't remember, is when you have to tell the computer what to do, versus declarative when you tell it what you want and it figures it out on its own. Angular uses declarative. We'll see that later as well. And a lot of popular apps from the time were made on it. Like, according to Wikipedia, Airbnb, Hulu, GroupShark, rest in peace, Foursquare, rest in peace. But they were big back then. So it's important, our boy Backbone. Underscore is just a library of function helpers. It introduced a lot of array methods like filter, reduce, map. They have eventually become standard. Then we have Lodash, which is a fork of underscore that introduces even more methods. Oh, by the way, it's called underscore because you call like an underscore that and then the method. That's the way it looked. Both of these were eventually destroyed by ECMAScript 6 because all those methods, now we can use them on native JavaScript. We don't need an extra library. And finally, in John's creations, it's CoffeeScript, which is a programming language that transpiles to JavaScript. And its goal was to make code like more readable, like an actual text you're writing. The older parts of the project I worked on were done in CoffeeScript, and it was very confusing. You don't have curly braces, you use indentation, and when you're like writing code, it's like, for example, there you see like switch when, you use words. It also introduced arrow functions. It's hard with was in the right place. Unfortunately, it didn't age well, so we don't use it anymore. But it was important because it introduced transpilers to like the mainstream. It was a base for that. Now we have Node. I'm not going to go into a lot of Node, but it's how we use JavaScript on the server side. It was created by some guy called Ryan Dow. And Node needs a framework too. And Node's framework was Express.js. It was Node's de facto framework. Express 4 was so good that it got kind of stuck there. There was no need. There was work on Express 5, but like no one really used it because Express 4 already covered everything. It introduced routing, URL pattern matching, sending JSON. And since we now have Fetch API like natively, we don't need it anymore. But it's still in our hearts and in probably your legacy projects. Let's wait for the image to load. That guy here, he's called Tom. I don't remember his last name. And he had this feeling that JavaScript apps felt broken. And that every time somebody talked about JavaScript, they told him that they feel wrong, they feel broken. And people would mock you if you program on JavaScript. They wouldn't take you seriously. And so there was this framework called Sprout Core. It was one of the first frameworks to develop client-side architecture. And it wanted to create web apps with an experience similar to desktop apps. Tom here believed that where JavaScript felt broken was around URLs. URLs are the core of the web. And he started working on the router to make this like more clean. So he forks Sprout Core and creates something called Ember.js. Ember.js uses model view controller architecture. For HTML, it uses handlebars. Is the curly braces that you added in between your HTML. They're called handlebars because they look like mustaches. And it was very opinionated. You had to have things on the correct folders in the way Ember wanted it. My first job was in Ember. I have experience with this. It uses routes, models, components, services, and templates. The thing that everybody agrees it does very well was actually the routing. So the main thing of Ember was like you had a very clean URL to the next page on your application, etc. And around this time, we had this big rivalry between Angular and Ember. This is just a random image I found on Google, just to prove you that this existed. This was a thing. It was around the time I started working. Some people will say, which is better, Angular or Ember? What would I use for my project? In the end, well, Ember did not win. But what about Angular? Well, Angular's origins come from this guy called Misko Hevery, who used to work at a place called BradTech LLC. And originally, it was this software called GetAngular.com. And it was an online JSON storage service. And for enterprise, it will be priced by the megabyte for easy-to-make applications. They had a few subscribers before they realized they would abandon the business and just release it as an open source framework. And that became our boy AngularJS. Now we call it AngularJS. It was called Angular back at the time, just to make a difference from the next version. It extended HTML, so you got these things called directives that it looks like an HTML attribute that started with ng for Angular. And you had things there. It had the thing called the scope. It was aimed to simplify development and testing of SPAs. I've worked on 2 different projects that had AngularJS as their legacy code. And it's not pretty, but it had good intentions as well. It supported model view controller and model view model architecture, and it used declarative programming as opposed to Backbone that used imperative programming. It's no longer updated because its team did a complete rewrite and created Angular 2. That is just now Angular, what you know as Angular. And this is just another random image I took from the internet to show you that they're different. There are comparisons between them. Angular is written in TypeScript. AngularJS is JavaScript. It's different. I'm not going to go in detail with this. So we now have Angular 2, a complete rewrite from our boy AngularJS. It's now called Angular, but to make them different, I added the 2. It was called Angular 2 on its time. It's TypeScript-based. It has a hierarchy of components, different expression syntax. I make the note that it uses 2-way data binding just to compare it to React that uses 1-way data binding. And there's no scope anymore. Sorry, Angular. So we're going to make a pause here. We've reached around 2015 in our timeline. JavaScript is no longer a baby. And we have ECMAScript 6. When ECMA finally got together and launched a major revision of JavaScript. And a lot of the things that we used to need frameworks or libraries for now are part of vanilla JavaScript. Yay! Arrow functions, array methods, constant let, the spread operator, classes, promises, all of these I used to ask on interviews. So learn what they are if you're going to interview about JavaScript. As well, around this time, Facebook is very popular, and it's growing and growing and growing. And Facebook Ads.org needs a library, because it's getting more features, it has more engineers working on them, the code base is getting larger, and code maintenance is becoming very difficult. Any feature slows things down. And what they used to do was this thing called cascading updates. So one change comes in, they need to figure out what change needs to be done to re-render, and then it grows bigger, and it gets to a point that they don't even know what do we need to change for this thing to update. So they create a library you might not have heard of. It's called React. Has anyone here heard of React? React? React is a library, not a framework. Remember that's another interview question. And it's used mainly for building UI. It's component-oriented, and it uses this thing called the virtual DOM. So you have your real DOM, and then you have the virtual DOM, and in something called the reconciliation phase, it compares them both and says, oh, it changed here, and it just updates the changes, so you don't need to update everything to have a little update, sorry. It used lifecycle methods. Now we use hooks, and uses one-way data binding as opposed to Angular. And for its HTML rendering, it uses JSX, which looks like HTML, but it isn't. In the background, it's doing React.create element and creates the actual HTML, but it's just faking you guys. We also have this guy called Evan Yu. He worked on several projects on Google, and he just took what he liked the best from working on AngularJS on those projects and created his own framework, which is called Vue. Vue uses model view model architecture, and it's mainly for UI and single-page applications. It's focused on the view layer, hence its name. It used declarative rendering, component composition, and directives. You can see here on directives that there's the inspiration from AngularJS. Fun fact, its version names are from manga and anime. If you go to Wikipedia and look at Vue's versions, and you're an anime fan, you might find something familiar. And last but not least, Rick Harris here. He used to work at The Guardian as a visual journalist, but he said that the tooling he had for visual journalists was not enough. So just like any regular person would do, he created his own framework. Yes, why not? He created this framework called Reactive that it was inspired by Backbone and Angular and all those we already covered. But he figured out that it was creating too much JavaScript code. So it was not optimal for mobile, not optimal for the web. And then on a meetup called Brooklyn.js, Brooklyn, once a month, he talks to somebody else about this. So as a way of atoning for his sins, he creates Svelte. And the thing with Svelte is that it's very light. He was talking about compilers with this guy, so he figures a way to use it to compile HTML templates. And Svelte uses reactive statements, bundles tiny, just that's the name. And it looks like an HTML page. It has like a script tag for your script. And then in between your HTML, you merge some code. I don't know, it looks like I would have wanted frameworks to look like when I was young and starting with this. There are many, many more frameworks and libraries. I tried to cover the most popular. What's next? I made this presentation around January, so this might have changed by now. But some say that the date object, memoization, regex, escaping and modifiers, the international duration format, they may be things that might be standardized for JavaScript next. I believe that we never know what's next. It always surprises us. So maybe some new framework we had not heard about and we did not predict becomes more popular. Maybe we stay with this. I don't know. But thank you for coming to my talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions?
What is the difference between a framework and a library?
Ooh, I wish I could. A library you just import it and it has some like functions, methods, and whatnot. And a framework is like a whole way, a whole methodology of doing things. So for example, with React is the library, but Next.js is a React framework.
Now, can you just repeat the question?
Sorry, the question was, what's the difference between a library and a framework? Another question.
So I find it really difficult to understand the difference between a promise and an observable. Is there any way you could help?
The question is, what's the difference between a promise and an observable?
Yeah.
From the top of my head, a promise is you're calling something, and once it comes back, then you execute the code. And an observable, it's just like waiting there. And when the event you're observing triggers, then it executes the code. But it's not like actively calling for it. I may be wrong, so we can see it after the code. Or a lot of experts here may correct me.
So in your talk, you talked about the web going from the server to more of SPAs and the client side. And there seems to be a going back to things rendered in the server, just for you to expand on that. Things like Next and that sort of thing.
The question here is that from my talk, the web went to the server, and then from the server to the client side, and there seems to be a tendency now of going back to the server. I've noticed it. I think life is just cyclical. We used to have like monolithic applications, now microservices. Now we're going back to monolithic applications. We always find like the grass is greener. It's part of evolution. Anyone else?
which technology is your favorite?
Which technology is my favorite? I've been working with React for the past years. I'm very familiar with it. I tinker a little bit with Svelte, and I like it very much, but since I have not used it professionally, I don't know it enough to love it or hate it.
Given like equal experience in all of the frameworks and libraries that you mentioned, if somebody were to be building an app from scratch, which one do you think they would choose?
The question is, if someone were going to build an app from scratch, which would they use? I believe right now we usually go to what's more popular or has more support. I think React is still like king of frameworks. Or Queen, I don't know React's gender. I have, I said I have a lot of faith in Svelte, but it depends on your project's requirements and how much you want to experiment versus how much support you want to do well.
What's your favorite side project that you personally worked on?
What's my favorite side project that I personally worked on? I did a video game in college that was like very, very short, not JavaScript related at all, but it was the closest I had to fulfilling my dreams. Question on the back.
Do you think JS developers had it easier back then, or JS developers have it easier right now?
Did JS developers have it easier back then or easier back now? Personally, I think it might be easier now that there's like a lot of support for JavaScript. Because back then it was like the ugly language. You do JavaScript. And now it's evolved, it's consolidated, you can even use it for front end and back end. So I do like JavaScript. I saw somebody else raise their hand.
Yeah, I was wondering, in preparation for this presentation, what was the most interesting piece of information you found in the history of JavaScript?
In preparation for this presentation, what was the most interesting? I did like the part about the browser wars, but also I was very happy when I found there was an actual interview with the creator of Svelte, because some of these guys, like, I couldn't find anything about them.
Do you still believe, like, after so many years JavaScript has came through, do you still believe that, despite the quirks, JavaScript is still called the most ironic language? Because it was built in a very shoddy manner at first, just because they were using the word Java as a marketing point, and then suddenly they just kind of build it up to become a new standard. Do you still believe that because of its quirks, it is still one of the most beloved, yet the most ironic and the most hated language at the same time?
Do I still believe JavaScript is the most ironic language? I believe our origins should not define us. So, however, JavaScript came to life. It had its challenges, like I said, they regretted making not the equal operator not strict since the beginning. We fixed that. It has its quirks, but I love it. It's easy to work with it. It's given me a job. And I think it has matured, like, we're all here for JavaScript. It has matured into something, so yes. I don't know if it's ironic or not, but it's grown into its own good thing, and I respect it. Someone else?
Question about the relationship between JavaScript and TypeScript. I keep hearing different predictions. Somebody is saying that everyone is going to TypeScript because it's more structured, and someone else is saying that JavaScript will get new functionality to support types, so TypeScript will become obsolete. So what's your opinion?
The question is about the relationship between JavaScript and TypeScript?
What do you think the future will be?
Or what will be the future? You know, it can go either way. Right now, I think the present is going to TypeScript because it's like safer for the apps. But just like it happened with fetch and underscore and all that, JavaScript might start like implementing those things natively, so we don't need another language that compiles into JavaScript.
What do you think about using WebSockets rather than REST for a backend API.
What do you think about using WebSockets rather than REST? I don't know anything about that, I'm sorry. But there are a lot of very talented people here who might be able to help. Before I go to the next slide is a QR to my LinkedIn and a QR to the place I work that is only hiring from Montreal, but if you don't care about going to Montreal, you can scan it. It's looking mostly for senior positions, but I mean, it's there. Maybe I get a referral. Maybe not. That's it. I hope you like it. You have fun.